The 2011 Chicago Bulls were supposed to become a dynasty. With the youngest MVP in NBA history and a stacked roster that went on to win 62 games, this team shocked everyone by winning more than the Miami Heat. Of course, we all know what happened when they were on the brink of greatness. Derrick Rose tore his ACL in a game that many fans think that he never should have been in. This one play forever altered NBA history. Derrick Rose came back, but he was just never the same. The youngest MVP in NBA history was eventually traded and went from a star to a starter to a veteran bench warmer. Derrick Rose's tragic story is well known even outside of NBA circles. But what about the rest of his squad? What happened to the rest of the 2011 Chicago Bulls? While Derrick Rose's career was tragically cut short basically after 2011, there were a few players whose careers managed to peak a little bit after this year. Kyle Korver, a late bloomer, took off after leaving Chicago. In 2012, he was traded to Atlanta and immediately thrived, becoming one of the league's top catch-and-shoot players. By 2014, Korver led the league with a 49% three-point shooting mark, earning his only career All-Star selection as the Hawks made the Eastern Conference Finals. His 49% three-point percentage remains the 10th best season in NBA history. Korver continued to be a floor spacer for the Cavaliers during their two finals appearances in 2016 and 17, later finishing his career with the Bucks before retiring in 2020. He ended his career with a 43% three-point percentage, which is good for the third best of all time. Omar Asik left Chicago in 2012 after the Chicago Bulls chose not to match an offer by the Houston Rockets. He had a career year in Houston, playing all 82 games, averaging 10 points and 12 rebounds. However, his role was quickly diminished after Dwight Howard's arrival in 2013. Omar was traded to the Pelicans, where he had a few solid years as a backup before injuries took a toll. He returned back in Chicago in 2018 but was shortly waived after and retired due to his everlasting arthritis. Luol Deng was an elite player after 2011. He made 2 All-Star appearances and was well known as one of the league's best defenders. The 2013-14 season saw trade rumors swirl, and he was eventually traded to the Cavaliers midway through the season. Deng would then go on to have solid seasons with the Miami Heat before his career took a downturn after signing a 4-year $72 million contract with the Lakers. Injuries and being benched by the Lakers during their rebuild led to his eventual release. He would play in just one game during the 2017-18 season in one of the more weird circumstances in recent NBA history. Basically, he and the Lakers came to an agreement where he wouldn't even leave the locker rooms during games, as the Lakers would focus on rebuilding their core post-Kobe Bryant retirement. Deng would then have a brief stint with the Minnesota Timberwolves in 2019 before retiring that year. He went on to sign a one-day contract and retired as a Chicago Bull. Deng once had an incredibly promising prime that quickly diminished after one of the weirdest endings that we have seen to an NBA career. And Deng was one of the few star players on this team. Someone who also went on to have a few solid years was his teammate Joakim Noah. Noah was one of the key pillars of the 2011 Bulls, known for his defense and fiery leadership. After 2011, he continued to be the heart and soul of the Chicago team. He even earned 2 All-Star selections in 2013 and 2014. Noah would go on to have his best season in 2014, posting 12 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. He won Defensive Player of the Year and even finished 4th in MVP voting. After having a career year and after a season that gave the Windy City hope, knee and shoulder injuries limited him in the following years, and his numbers quickly began to decline. Noah was then traded to the New York Knicks in 2016, where injuries and a suspension continued the derailment of his career. By 2018, Joakim Noah was released by the Knicks and soon retired after that. Known for his toughness and his defense, Taj Gibson was another dependable piece for the Bulls post-2011. After a steady run with Chicago, Gibson played with the Timberwolves under coach Tom Thibodeau, providing veteran leadership. He was a solid starter but never quite reached the same level as he did during the Bulls' peak. As the NBA shifted towards a faster, more perimeter-centric game, Gibson's role diminished. He had brief stints with the New York Knicks and Washington Wizards, becoming a solid bench player and locker room presence. At 39 years old, Taj Gibson is still on an NBA roster where at the time that I make this, he has played about 24 games for the Charlotte Hornets. Carlos Boozer was a key addition to the Bulls, providing offense and rebounding in their 2010-11 season. But Boozer's career after 2011 was marked by inconsistency and his struggles with defense. While he had solid offensive seasons in Chicago, he could never live up to expectations. In 2014, the Chicago Bulls released Carlos Boozer under the amnesty clause, a clause in a contract that basically allows a team to release or waive a player if they don't live up to contract expectations, playing far below their expected level. Boozer would go on to spend 1 season as a Laker and 1 season in China before announcing his retirement from basketball in 2017. Carlos Boozer was definitely one player who had a quick fall off, but not all the players on the Chicago Bulls had a strong prime or even a prime to refer back to, and one of those players was Ronnie Brewer. Ronnie Brewer had a strong start to his career with the Bulls, known for his defense and his athleticism, but after the 2011 season, Brewer's play began to slip. His shooting numbers plummeted and his role shrank. He bounced around the league, playing briefly for the Knicks, Celtics, and Thunder, but his lack of a consistent offensive game kept him from securing a lasting role. He officially retired in 2016 after a short stint in the then NBA D-League. Also playing the guard position and starting at the shooting guard position for the 2010-11 team was Keith Bogans. He started all 82 games that year despite just scoring 4 points per game, which by modern NBA standards is completely unimaginable. He was a strong defender and leader, but as the NBA started to rapidly evolve, he just found himself without a role. He bounced between the Nets, Celtics, and eventually the 76ers G League team. Following his retirement, he was briefly a Knicks assistant coach before becoming a player development coach for the Detroit Pistons in 2022. CJ Watson was a reliable backup point guard for the Bulls, known for his ability to score and to distribute the ball. In 2012, he finished 11th in 6th Man of the Year voting, but he saw his role slowly diminish as he struggled with consistency later in his career. Watson's skill set became less valuable as guards in the NBA were asked to become more dynamic. He had brief stints with Brooklyn, Indianapolis, and Orlando, also playing in the G League and even the Turkish League before retiring in 2019. For a few more players, they had very brief roles during that 2010-11 season, and their roles never really grew after that year. One of these guys is Brian Scalabrine, someone who was never a star, but he was a GOAT, and you could argue one of the very first NBA internet memes. As a fan favorite, Scalabrine was known for his energy, leadership, and locker room presence. After 2011, Scal found himself at the end of the bench more often than not. He briefly considered returning to the NBA, but ultimately retired in 2012. After hanging up the sneakers, Scalabrine took on the role as a broadcaster, serving as a commentator and a coach for the Big Three League. He's now known for his commentary work and his continued love for the game, and not to mention, he's the GOAT. God, I hate myself saying that in 2025. I hate to say that. I'm so sorry. John Lucas III had a solid career as a backup point guard, primarily known for his speed and scoring abilities. He played on multiple teams after his time in Chicago, including stints with the Toronto Raptors and Washington Wizards. While Lucas never had a standout career, he always found a way to carve out a role as a reliable backup. After his playing career, Lucas was an assistant coach for the Timberwolves, Lakers, and Suns, and is currently a player development coach for the WNBA team, the Las Vegas Aces. Another player who is hardly worth mentioning is James Johnson, a guy who has seemingly just been everywhere. Johnson played just 13 games in the 2011 season. Johnson has only managed to score over 10 points per game 3 times in his entire career, but the now 37-year-old is still in the league, sitting at the end of the bench of the Indianapolis Pacers. No matter what you say of James Johnson's career or kind of make fun of him for being a guy who's barely in the league, you can't take away from the fact that he is a 16-year NBA veteran. And last but certainly not least is Rasul Butler, who only played in 6 games in the 2011 season. He bounced around the then NBA D-League playing for the Raptors and Thunder. In 2013, he won Impact Player of the Year, a D-League award for a player who makes the greatest contribution following an in-season acquisition. He then bounced around the Pacers, Wizards, and Spurs before being waived in the preseason by the Timberwolves. And he was also a part of the Big Three League in 2017. Unfortunately, Rasul Butler was killed in a car crash in 2018 with his partner Leah LaBelle at 38 years old. May he forever rest in peace. And of course, we can't forget about the man who ran the operations, Tom Thibodeau. Tibbs became synonymous with intense defense, hard work, and heavy minutes for his starters. His coaching philosophy was clear: to play your best players as much as possible and maximizing success. Tibbs' infamous moment came in those playoffs where Derrick Rose tore his ACL, a game where many people argued that he should never have been in. But I would say, and the Bulls GM at the time agreed with this, it is the playoffs, and at that time, Chicago was only up by around, 11 or 12 points on the Philadelphia 76ers. It's the playoffs. You don't take your starters out at that time. Even taking away the Tom Thibodeau part of that, it's very normal to be playing your best players in the playoffs at that time. It's just unfortunate that one of the most devastating injuries in all of sports history happened at that time. Despite the heartbreak of Rose's injury and all the questions surrounding Tom Thibodeau at that time, his coaching career never stopped there. After the 2011 season, he finished second in Coach of the Year voting in 2012 and third in 2014, continuing to solidify his reputation as one of the league's best coaches. In 2016, Tibbs moved on to the Minnesota Timberwolves, where he became the head coach and president of basketball operations. He was their head coach when that team made the playoffs for the first time in 14 years. And now he is in his current role as the head coach of the New York Knicks. After winning his second Coach of the Year award in 2021, Thibodeau has shown that his defensive mentality and his ability to inspire players hasn't gone anywhere. The Knicks have been playing some of their best basketball in recent years under head coach Tom Thibodeau. The 2011 Chicago Bulls were a perfect storm as that roster was stacked with talent, and so much of that talent peaked in that single season. While Derrick Rose remains as one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history, to me, that entire 2011 team will forever remain one of the biggest what-if teams in NBA history. Were they just a perfect storm of all of those players having just some of their best years at that time? Or if they stayed together, would they have continued to go on and become one of the best teams? If they kept a guy like Kyle Korver, would the Hawks never be as good as they were in 2013 and 2014? Would they be able to rival a team that was dominant like the Miami Heat? They were better than them for a whole season. But at the same time, this roster wasn't exactly one built for the new age of basketball, with so many of their players having their careers end specifically because of the rise of pace and space and because of the rise of the three ball. I can't help but think that they probably wouldn't have aged as well. That's assuming that Chicago would fail to build around the prime of Derrick Rose, and I am sure they would have put the right pieces in to complement Rose in the evolving NBA. Derrick Rose's tragic story is incredibly well known, but now you know just a little bit more about what happened to the 2011 Chicago Bulls.